Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. This term applies to those who lead a team. Maybe you own a business, maybe you're a C-suite executive, whatever it may be. If you're responsible for others, organizational maneuverability is key. What is that? How does it pertain to what you're doing as a leader? We're going to learn about that today. He's a gentleman that helps people with this all the time. Coachingforrelevance.com is his company, and this is what he does. He coaches people on leadership. Randy Swaim is back with us. Hey, Randy, how you doing?
Good, good. Glad to be here, and hope everybody that's listening is having a wonderful holiday season. So,
Yeah, it's good to have you back. I'm glad you had some time to jump on with us today. And how do we define organizational maneuverability?
well, the thing on it, and I'll just mention this very quickly, and then what I'll do today is I'll bring out one point that is perhaps a little bit deeper, that gives a little bit of a picture of some ways that leaders need to kind of think about, and very often they don't. But organizational maneuverability, if you think about it, in the current world, in business or in anything else, there are certain things that are aligned with what business has always been. You know, you try to go out and you try to connect with your clients and your prospects and all that kind of stuff, and you go out and make sure that they're taken care of so that they pay you and all that sort of stuff. All that is sort of normal. But what people, kind of forget about a lot is, and the organizational maneuverability is a concept that is trademarked for me out of Washington. But if you think about organizational maneuverability in today's world, with a lot of very different people that have been grown up and raised differently, but also with a lot of factors that come into play in business, in prospects for your clients, and all of that. Guess what? Not everything fits a rote academic superficial concept. So it's not just sort of playing the game of doing that, but you got to be aware of kind of how you're going to do that with not only with the potential, clients, but with your team and your team members and in your leadership. Guess what? What your team is becoming is very reflective of your leadership and success or not. And so that I'm going to kind of bring out just one aspect of that a lot of people don't realize. But I know a lot of people, and this is kind of one of the things that I relate to it with my pilot background and even my current pilot background, because flight crews and pilots and all that is one area where I bring a lot of this leadership aspect to. But what I take is, pilot leadership lessons, because guess what? When you go fly an airplane, not everything fits a rote academic thing, kind of thing. And you got to be ready for when it doesn't, you know, and what when you look at organizational maneuverability, what I kind of claim it as, it takes pilot leadership lessons and applies them to leading your teams in a rapidly changing, unpredictable environment. And so that's kind of the general picture of it. But I will bring one aspect of it that is a little bit deeper, that very often people don't really sense. But I will say this, that leaders need to understand it, because it's critical for where you're taking your team and are they really moving towards success. So I'll kind of bring that out, but it's a little bit of a deeper picture in a rapidly changing, unpredictable environment.
Well, when you talk about flying, piloting a plane, there you go with rapidly changing environment. Anything can happen. I mean, the weather alone, right?
That's right. That's right. And I'll tell you, there have been a number of times in my pilot career where, guess what? Those things came on the scene, and guess what? That's where I learned a lot of this, rather than just rote academic thing, but the experience of it and seeing it and doing it is very key. But when you are looking at that, there's one thing, and I'll go ahead and kind of lead into this just so that we're good on time and everything. But Now, I'll share one thing with you, that when you're talking about leading your team, it's not, if you're a manager, it's not just about you pointing fingers at your people and telling them what to do and dictating and all of this kind of stuff. There's still some people out there that think that that's leadership, but it isn't. And the thing I want to bring out, and it's just one aspect of this, but it also draws a little bit of a picture for how a leader needs to be involved in that kind of a thing. But it's this: when you talk about the people that are leading your teams, what you got to realize is that each person has perhaps grown up or been developed in a little bit of a different environment, different area, different whatever kind of thing. And here's the thing, that when you have a rapidly changing, unpredictable situation coming on the scene, guess what? You may have one or two people in your team that are aware and sense certain little aspects of it that nobody else does. And guess what? There are times when that can be very important. If in leading your team, all you're doing is going to a rote, superficial academic thing and then blaming it on the situation if it doesn't work, you're not being a good leader. But here's the thing: you may, when you have a certain factor, and one of the things that I tell people is, and this is true with aviation, as you just said, that when you're kind of moving in your strategic direction here, guess what? One of the things that I ask people a lot of times is, 4 to 6 months down the road, if the factor comes on scene that was the least expected, least understood factor you would have ever imagined, what do you think it's going to be? And I get them thinking about that. But the bottom line is, what a lot of people that are managers today may have a tendency to do, not everybody, but if they have a sense where there's a factor that's coming on the scene, and one or two of their team members see a certain thing about it where everybody else doesn't, there's a sense where sometimes they'll say, okay, well, we'll just do this, just do this, you all do this, shut that up, just go do this. But you know what? That's not what you want to do. And I will tell you that if you have to do that right at the moment because you have not developed your team to be functioning that way, that's your fault as the leader. But here's the factor: guess what? When you maybe have one or two people on your team that sense or experience certain factors of that nobody else did, sometimes if they verbalize it, that can be revolutionary in what you're trying to accomplish.
Mm.
And if you're shutting them down and just shutting off their mental processing, to include neuroscience kind of thing, if you're just shutting off their mental processing, you are not getting the job done. But you do need to be aware of one thing that a lot of people may not even sort of sense on this. But when they mention that, if you have one or two people, let's say you have 6 people on your team and 2 people mention one aspect of this situation and the factors that are coming on board that nobody else expected or realized, guess what? That should be a good communication point for a moment. Now, as a leader, the thing you want to be aware of is when you hear how the team is communicating that, you want to be aware of, is this like a synergistic team, or are there one or two people that sense that coming on board to try to control everybody just to kind of pat themselves on the back? Those two are very, very different. And the second one of that, patting your, controlling, freaking, and all that, that's not what you want. And that is not what you want to allow in the team. But if they're mentioning one aspect of it that make everybody else go, okay, you know what? Yeah, let's watch that as we go forward. Let's watch for that possibly. And you know what? And people are, kind of have a little bit of a vision to watch it as you're stepping forward. Guess what? That can be a huge value to it. But one of the things as the leader, you have to be aware of And sometimes this can be very vague. And if all you're doing is just telling them what to do and pointing fingers, you're shutting them down. You're shutting their processing, you're shutting their brain down, you're shutting their vision down, and they're just going on autopilot and just, okay, I guess he just wants us to do what he says and just whatever the outcome, kind of thing. And that you don't want on your team. But you also have to be a little bit aware, because when you look at that and you're aware of that, when they're bringing up these one or two little aspects of this factor that's coming on the scene, you want to be looking at that, because guess what? It's not overly clear cut all the time, but is the rest of your team coming together like this and going, yeah, let's watch for that as we go forward. You know what? Let's be ready. You know what? If that gets bad, here's what we'll do. And they know that as we go forward. That can be huge, but it can be very insidious also if those two people are playing control freak games with the rest of the team to make everybody solely dependent on them. If that's what's happening as the leader, you got to kind of shut that down. And because that's going to cause the rest of the team to not be able to envision what's important to really get us to the success that we're looking for on this. And so as a leader, sometimes instead of just shutting everything down and telling everybody, yeah, just do what I said, kind of thing, and that's all you do, that may not really get you where you want to go. Because here's the thing, if they saw that one little aspect of the factors that are coming on scene or whatever, guess what? That may be something that nobody else saw. Then that may be something that if you can either work with that or cause it to not be a problem or whatever, that can basically take you a lot further than maybe you would have gone with it and reached a higher level of success. But very often when you look at your team and you see that aspect of the oneness and how they're communicating, how they're working together, sometimes mentioning that to, from them, that can be a positive thing, because if nothing else, it enhances the situational awareness of what you're doing. But on the other hand, if it goes far enough where somebody's just trying to control and they're just trying to say, well, all of you are just screwed up because you don't see what we see, that is not professional, it's not ethical, and it's not teamwork. And so as a leader, you have to gain a little bit of clarity on what are the factors that are coming on scene in your team that show you where it is on that range. Because, here it could be extremely positive, very, very positive. Here it could be dysfunctional. Do you see in the reaction of your team and how they're working together, how that can be, where on that range it might be? And you know what? In the midst of a circumstance, that can be a little bit of a challenge. But you know what? Sometimes that's what we leaders have to be aware of. And so, is your team developed to be able to work together in situations like that and to really make the difference? And I just throw it out because it's just one little sense of that aspect of it. Because as we said earlier, organizational maneuverability, guess what? That's when things are coming on scene that you didn't expect. That it's not pure academic, and you got to be ready for that. And so, how is your team truly being aware that they are ready for that and they can work together and they can reach radical results in their communication, in their synergy, in their teamwork, in their belief of who you are as a leader, as the team is, in the situation that they're in? And because let's say if those two people kind of bring up one or two little sensing factors in it, that can make everybody sometimes just change your direction, maybe 1 degree. That's all it takes, possibly. And so it is interesting that when you talk about this concept of organizational maneuverability and you're leading your team in a unpredictable, sometimes rapidly changing, non-educational situation. Um, to what to what level as a leader have you really developed your team to be able to handle that successfully, so that it's not disconnecting them? It's not, one or two people are not playing control freak games, but it comes up in a way that the team really becomes synergistic, not just control freakish, but synergistic given the situation. And the reaction to that, when they, one or two people mention that one factor, everybody else may go, yeah, you know what? And it's this too. Oh yeah, kind of thing. And how you do that. And so it's when you're talking about this aspect and you're talking about situations that are not overly predictable, it's just one aspect of, as a leader, you know, be aware of when some of those conversations happen. Because guess what? If you have one or two people on the team that are aware of a circumstance or a factor or something like that, that the rest of the team was not aware of because they didn't think about it, that can be a huge positive. But how is it happening stepping forward with that? And as a leader, are you aware of that? Have you developed your team to be able to not just collapse under this person's, authority over here or whatever, but to really grow together and become a successful team? If you've been doing that, then that can be a beneficial situation in that. If you can't, what can happen is if you have one or two persons, just with whatever it is, they can have a sense where they just say, well, you know what? Screw it. It's going to be screwed up if we don't do it this way. So everybody, you just got to do it this way. And they start playing control freak games. If you ever see that, you got to stop that, because everybody else may have the other people in your team may have a dramatic, amazing, successful insight on how to reach where they're going, even in the midst of that situation. And so the communication and all that takes place. But when you're a leader, are you aware of what your team's doing, or are you just going with rote academic thoughts? And you got to be aware of some of that, even in the midst of challenging situations. So I throw it out just on that. It's a key aspect about situational awareness as well, and making sure that the situational awareness is a high level and all that. But as a leader, that can be a challenge. You got to be able to look down and have a sense of kind of what that's really doing and how is it doing it, and is that valuable for where we're trying to go. And it's so just something to think about.
Hey, Randy, you mentioned something earlier, and it just clicked in my mind. When somebody's leading a team and they're unsure, uh, there's some challenges on their end. They're not disclosing them with the team. Do you think the team energetically is picking up on all of that? They're reading you in many different ways, and you might think, they don't know anything. We'll figure this all out. Yeah, but they
Yeah.
know. But they know.
Well, but you know what? With what you're saying, that can be another aspect of this kind of mindset, because guess what? There's something called nonverbal communication. And you know what? When you come up with something, as you just implied, even as the leader, if you come up with something and it's not being communicated, chances are it's being communicated non-verbally.
Mm,
And the problem is they don't know what it's about.
yeah.
And so what they're saying is he's not communicating to us. He doesn't believe in us. Oh boy, why are we doing this? Kind of thing and stuff like that. And so there's just a lot of aspects about what you said there, which can be aligned with this, and it doesn't mean you have to tell the people everything that you kind of struggle with or whatever. No, but you know what? Communicate in such a way that they know. And you know what? When you communicate it in such a way that they have clarity on kind of where this is going and what we're trying to accomplish, and you know what? This is how we can get there. And there's times where you may step aside, and there's times where when it's really catastrophic, you got to be out in front of them and saying, "Hey guys, let's go this way. Let's face it." There are times when you got to do that. But you know what? There's other times where you can compliment them and commend them on what they're doing because they work together and came up with some amazing things. And maybe one or two people had insights on something and another person had an insight on something. But you know what? They worked together in such a way that it reached dramatic and radical success. And if you can do that, that is huge. But it's when you talk about this aspect of organizational maneuverability and all that, being aware of, your people are different. And you know what? Some of them may have insights because they've been in a situation before that relates to this. But you know what? They may have been in a situation before that went bad because of the people that were involved in it at the time. Maybe. And so if they come in and badmouth everybody, that may put you aside and that may shut everything down. But it's just something to think about when you're talking about those kind of situations, somewhat related to organizational maneuverability. But as a leader, how do you do that? Are you aware of when you have people? Because your people are going to be having slightly different insights sometimes on a given situation. And you know what? That can be a good thing because not everything's academic.
Got about a minute left. Curious
Okay.
about this question. Do you think it's a leadership kiss of death when something major is going on within the company and you're, as a leader, you're starting to detect that they know, I have a hint of something going on here, but you haven't addressed it. You haven't spoken to them, haven't come clean, if you will. Uh, is that the moment where you start losing
In
your
short,
team's
in
faith?
short, in short, I would say yes, because here's the thing. If you know that this is starting to go bad
Yep.
and you know your people are going to kind of feel it, one thing a leader does is comes alongside and has a sense of what they're feeling right now. And how can we, when the situation is unexpected, how can we step forward and how can we be successful? How can we feel good about the journey that we're on? And what's the value of that? And that's one thing that a leader's got to be aware of. If you're just going to kind of stop aside and say, well, screw it, kind of thing. If your company is going bad, guess what? When you talk to your people, they may, because of the way you connected with them in a positive way, they may come up with a dramatic, radical picture and vision. And it may be something that some of the executive people look at it and go, boy, I didn't think about that.
Mm,
And somebody goes, well, I'd like to.
mm.
Oh,
You know,
let's look at that and start building a strategy on the company possibly. So yeah, there's an aspect of what you just said that if you just do that and not communicate to them and not go connect with your people, they're going to feel disconnected, and that is not good.
back to the aircraft analogy, you're on a jetliner, you hear a noise, you little vibration, you're the
Yep.
passenger, the leader is the pilot. Nobody has said anything to you. How do you feel?
Yeah. Yep.
How do you feel?
Yep.
You,
And
you're wondering if the plane going down, what's going on? They're not telling me, right?
yeah. And to be honest, that is true. That's a good picture of it because that's why the flight crew has to be able to communicate with the passengers
Yeah.
and the flight attendants because guess what? Tell them, just want to let you know we got to do this, but I want you folks to be okay. And I will tell you, in fact, I'll give you just one example on this. Take just a minute or two, if that's okay. But yeah, I know we're about out of time, but there was one client that was in an airplane that I trained in. And so this was, oh golly gee, probably 12 years ago. But he told me this story. They took off, and what happened was, all the passengers were kind of walking around having fun, drinking a little bit of tea or whatever, kind of thing. And the cabin entry door light came on, but the door was not opening. The door was not loose. What it was one of the little pins in there had had pulled off the electrical connection. And so it turned the light on. Now that there was no risk to the door, but the flight crew came on and the captain said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to go back and sit down in your seats and strap in again." And he said, "I want you to understand there's no threat, there's no risk." And he said, "But we just, want to, just in case anything were to happen, we just want to let you know we got one light on up here that's not a big risk, but we just want you to go back and strap in and be comfortable." And they did. All the passengers did, the flight attendants did, and unless a passenger needed something. But guess what? They went back, and they landed. And guess what? When they landed, the door opened just perfect. And it just, so yeah, that's just one little example of what you're talking about. But to be able to connect with them to the extent that you are bypassing that and not connecting with your people, that can be the dysfunctional and
Sure.
the unethical and the lack of leadership that happens. So, a lot of times in stresses like that, there's a lot of things that can be at play, and with different, like I say, different senses, different things they see because of the way they were kind of raised or whatever. But guess what? If you bring it together, it can be huge.
Even just some transparency, to your point about the door situation, at least the team passengers know a little something. So you're thinking, the pilot, the leader, is thinking about them and their feelings. Maybe you don't have to know everything at that moment. Good stuff today. Website is coachingforrelevance.com. If you're looking to up your leadership game and make big differences in your organization or even your business, you're not a hard sell. Reach out to Randy.
That's right. I don't do sales pitches. If you got a need, we'll come up with something, but I just connect with people and get to know them.
Yeah, just have that conversation. Randy, thank you so much for being here today.
Okay, we'll look forward to it again, Steve.
You got it. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.